is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is not just the first week of college football this weekend. It is that, and we talked about that with Ed Feng yesterday, but we also got match week number 4 in EPL. We have got the playoff opener for the NASCAR Cup Series in Darlington, and we've got Formula One back on the schedule for this week. They're out in Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. It is a jam-packed sports weekend. Here to break down that with us and talk some EPL is Austan Cass. We'll talk to him, pick his brain on the biggest match of this week, Arsenal against Man United, and also talk about his favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook. Then I'll go through NASCAR on Darlington and Formula One in Monza. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Austan Cass. You can find him on Twitter at Austan Cass. He is a senior editor for FanDuel Research. Austan, we are on to match week number 4. How you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, hearing you rattle off all the sports stuff coming up just got me really excited for this weekend.
It got me like, I know that like it goes in like waves for me for the NFL where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like so excited. Oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed knowing the season's around the corner, but still excited. But then when you add in, like this is like the last quote unquote free weekend until January or whatever it is. But when it's offset by having all this stuff, it's really hard for me to have like the Sunday scaries effectively of anything. Cause like, it's just kind of a loaded weekend, man.
Yeah. I think this is like the best sports time of the year, especially once baseball playoffs get going. I really like the playoffs. And I mean, March Madness is amazing for those couple days of the first weekend, but this is such a great time. There's just so much going on.
There really is. So we're going to try to cover all the bases. As mentioned, we did talk about college football with Ed Feng yesterday. Week 1 preview is posted on Covering the Spread, the FanDuel YouTube page, and over on FanDuel TV Plus. If you want to watch FanDuel TV Plus, you can watch on Amazon, Amazon TV, Apple TV, or Roku devices. You can also check it out by going to FanDuel.com/watch. Log in with your FanDuel ID, FanDuel username, and password. You can watch Up and Adams live there, along with all the FanDuel podcasts for Covering the Spread, Solo Shot, and NFL Heat Check 1 week from today as well. Let's start things off here by talking about match week number 4 in the EPL, Austan. And the big match of the week is going to be on Sunday. That is between Arsenal and Manchester United. Right now, Arsenal minus 130 to win this game. The Man United money line is plus 330. A draw is plus 290. When you look at this match, Austan, anything stand out to you as far as betting at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Yeah, so I like Arsenal at that minus 130 money line. For me, it's pretty simple. I think Arsenal are a good bit better than Man United, and there's a lot of numbers that would point to that. And then once you factor in the home field advantage, I think Arsenal at minus 130 makes a lot of sense. It's very similar reasoning to what I went with Newcastle last week against Liverpool. The result didn't go our way, but by XG, Newcastle really controlled that game, so it makes me feel good about the process. So Arsenal's got an expected goal differential of plus 3.3, according to FBref. Through 3 matches, United are at plus 1.9. A year ago, Arsenal finished with an expected goal differential that was 12.6 goals better than Man United's. And by XG, Arsenal thrashed United when they hosted them last year, 3.1 to 0.4. It wasn't just at Arsenal that United struggled. United had a miserable away record against all the top sides last year. In 4 matches against the other 4 sides that finished in the top 5, Man United lost all 4 times, and the aggregate score was 18-5. The only 1 goal defeat of the bunch was the match at Arsenal, which finished 3-2 despite the super lopsided XG score. Arsenal, meanwhile, had the 3rd best home expected goal differential in the league last year and played very well in their last match that was at home. They tied Fulham 2-2, but on XG it was 3.2 to 0.6. So we've got an Arsenal team that I think is better than Man United. Arsenal plays really well at home, and then a United side that struggles mightily on the road against good teams. So it all adds up to me like an Arsenal at minus 130.
Do you put more weight into performance against like top tier teams in a league where it can be a bit top heavy, and where the gap between the top end teams and the bottom end teams is a bit larger. So like in theory, you look at the table, you look at, futures markets for the EPL, Man United actually grades out as being a decent team in that regard if you like rank them. But it seems like there are big tiers, and it doesn't sound like you view Man United as being as close to that top tier as you view Arsenal. Is that a proper way to sum things up there?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I think, I don't know if it's last episode or maybe the episode before, I think we talked about I like Man United to not make the top 4. Mm-hmm. So of those top teams, I have them near the bottom. But your point about like the big matches when the other big sides play each other, I rely pretty heavily on that sample because those matches will play out much differently for the top teams than other matches. So, for example, in those matches, Manchester United are going to have a lot less of the ball, have to play a lot more defense, probably try to hit teams on the counter, especially away from home. So if they're really struggling in those types of matches, that matters a lot to me when trying to predict how they're going to be in those matches going forward.
It's just a different kind of skill and a different kind of strength is required in those matches. I think it does make a lot of sense to put more weight into those. And that does lead Austin to liking the Arsenal money line, currently minus 130 over at FanDuel Sportsbook. But plenty of other matches on tap for this week, Austin, before we have EPL on a bye week next week. So when you look at the other matches for this week, where else do you see value at FanDuel Sportsbook?
So this is a little terrifying to say, but I like Everton's money line. They're plus 145. It's the first match Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. They're playing at Sheffield United. It's really scary to back Everton right now. They've lost 3 straight matches. They haven't scored a goal so far. And it feels like they're headed for another season where they'll be fighting off relegation. And they probably have to be in a pretty fragile mental state right now, given how the first 3 matches have gone for them. So all that's obviously pretty scary. But there are reasons to back them. I think odds makers agree because they've made Everton a slim favorite here. The biggest reason to be bullish about Everton is that Sheffield United have been even worse than Everton. I think I've kind of dogged on them a few times here. I think them or Luton Town are probably going to be the worst team in the league this year. So yeah, the Blades are also winless. They have an expected goal differential of minus 5.1, which is the second worst in the league. They've mustered just 0.5, 0.5, and 0.7 expected goals in attack through their 3 matches. They've conceded at least 1.5 XG in every match. The other reason to not be super grossed out by Everton is that they haven't been as bad as the results say. Their expected goal differential is only minus 0.8. So 4.3 goals better than Sheffield United's. Sheffield United's XG numbers are a little skewed by having to face Man City last time out, but the Blades' aggregate XG tally versus Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace, 2 sides I would say are somewhat comparable to Everton, is 1.XG scored and 3.3 XG allowed. So, yeah, like I said, we've got a pretty bad Everton team, but one that's not as terrible as the results say, and Sheffield United has been every bit as bad as their results say. So if Everton's spirit isn't too crushed by their dreadful start, I think they can take 3 points from this game, and I'm into them at this money line. But I am a little worried that if Everton concede first, that things might really snowball for them. But overall, I do like them at this plus 145 number.
We do see situations like that in, like, if you're betting NFL, where a team just gets like demoralized and things like that. But I think the saving grace for you in this regard is there's going to be a lot to play for Everton regardless if they're trying to avoid relegation, and it's still pretty early in the year. So I understand where you're coming from the perspective of I don't want to be too wary of betting on a gross team. And, the stink of having 0 goals so far may allow us to get them at a bit of a value. And obviously, again, like you said, bookmakers are not dumb to that. They know, and they do make Everton the safe favorite here at plus 145. But how much do you worry about the mental side of things at this point? Because from my perspective, the season just started, so there should be a long way to go. Does that bother you knowing that it's been such a rough start?
It definitely does bother me.
Yeah.
Everton are a really big historically and not a club that should be fighting just to stay in the division.
Right.
What they've had to do for 2 straight years. They actually came into the last day last year needing a result to avoid relegation. So I think each time it feels like, well, this next year, like it won't happen again. And then it's like, well, it sure seems like it's going to happen again. But I think we see it a lot in the NFL where you have a break, like a week-long break between games, that momentum doesn't really carry over.
Right.
And each game's its own monster. So that's what I'm telling myself, at least when I'm back to Everton. But I just think there's a lot of things that point to Everton being the better side. And I like that plus 145 number.
Well, hopefully for us, Sheffield is just as crushed, and we can ignore the narrative side of things and just bask in what XG is saying. That is Austan Cass. You can find him on Twitter at Austan Cass. Find his work over at FanDuel Research by going to FanDuel.com/research. Austan, no show next week because of the off week, but looking forward to having you back on once again later on this fall to talk more EPL. Good luck to you this weekend. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, thank you once again to Austan for breaking down the EPL for us and slowly getting me to understand soccer a bit more than I did before. We'll dive in and talk some NASCAR and Formula One here in just 1 second. But first, get out your game day gear because college football is back and FanDuel wants you to join in on the fun. Right now, all customers can get a no-sweat bet for week 1. Just place a bet on any week 1 college football game. You'll get bonus bets back if you don't win. Bet on money line, spreads, totals, and more. Just visit the FanDuel Sportsbook app and kick the college football season with America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Max refund is $5 unless otherwise specified. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Connecticut. 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700. Or in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In West Virginia, 1-800-gambler.net. In Massachusetts, Hope is here. Gambling Helpline, ma.org, or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. And in New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY. Let's talk now about some NASCAR, where they have the opening week of the playoffs this week. It is in Darlington, and it's a bit of a tricky race to handicap because the past 2 or so months, past 3 months actually, have been a lot of road courses, a lot of pack tracks, and not a lot of courses similar to Darlington. Now, Darlington is unique to begin with, but haven't seen many tracks like this recently. We've seen some teams like RFK Racing, Ford in general, getting a bit better recently. So it's kind of hard to know fully what to expect. And as a result, my model has no drivers with win odds above 10.12%. I think that's where Denny Hamlin settles in at as the favorite in my model for this week's race. And you see Kyle Larson, Martin Truex Jr., 5-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Obviously, I won't get there. The good thing is I don't have to avoid playoff drivers in order to find value in the outright market for this week. I can still get a driver with big motivation, get a driver who has been fast on tracks like this on a good team, and bet them for this week. And to me, that leads me to Tyler Reddick, 13-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that FanDuel is actually above market on Tyler Reddick, 13-1, a pretty short number relative to what you can get elsewhere. But even at 13-1, I still show value on Reddick as of right now. He is 8% to win for me versus 7.1% implied odds. And the reason my model loves Reddick is because he is very good on tracks with a lot of tire fall off. That is a key characteristic of Darlington because very few tracks have as much tire fall off as this one does. Other tracks that are similar to that are Fontana and Homestead, a couple of spots where Reddick has traditionally run very well. Now, Darlington is not a spot where he won in Xfinity, and he has not won in the Cup Series either. But he did have 2 podiums here last year when he was racing with Richard Childress Racing. I think 2311 is a bit better equipment than RCR is. So equipment upgrade for him, where he finished in the podium twice last year. Also had 2 podiums here in the Xfinity Series back when he was a regular down there. So Reddick, in theory, should be a good track fit here because of his experience and his quality on tracks with a lot of tire fall off. And we've seen that even if it hasn't resulted in a win just yet. So Reddick, to me, I think is a great bet for this weekend. I also show value in his teammate Bubba Wallace. If you could bet 23-11 Racing in general to win this week, which you can do at some spots, I show value in Bubba individually at 28-1. I just like Reddick's upside more than I like Wallace's. So I feel good about 23-11 in general, getting back to a track where speed matters quite a bit, a track where they both had good runs, are capable of having good runs. So 13-1 on Reddick, not the best number you can get, but even if it is the best number you can get, I do still show value there on Reddick to win for this week. Other bets I like for this week are both top 10 bets on non-playoff drivers. And I don't mind betting an outright on a non-playoff driver. I actually had Eric Jones to win this race last year. So he was a non-playoff driver. Non-playoff drivers won each of the opening 3 races in the first round of the playoffs last year. So I can bet on guys not in the playoffs and still feel pretty good about that if they're fast enough. And Alex Bowman is driving for Hendrick, which means to me, he's probably going to have that speed. And his top 10 odds are plus 190. I think that is a good amount longer than it should be. I have Bowman at 39% to finish inside the top 10. His implied odds here are 35%. And Bowman has struggled coming off of his back injury, but it does seem like he's been getting a bit better overall of late. He's had better runs, and it lines up well where we go to a slick track, and Bowman has traditionally run pretty well on those and on concrete. And I feel like even though there's not a lot of tire fall off on concrete tracks, there is some similarities where you got to search for the right groove, stuff like that. So I do tend to care a bit about concrete when we go to places like Darlington, and Bowman does tend to run pretty well there. Now, Darlington specifically has not been a fantastic track for Bowman. Did finish runner-up here back in 2020, the first race off the COVID break. He had a 6th place finish, I think, in the final race that year as well. He was 10th in the second race last year. So it hasn't been his best track, but also has not been awful. But I think that what we get here is a driver in very good equipment who has shown strength on slick tracks in the past, and you're getting him at plus 190 for a top 10. I think that's good enough value to bet him. So Alex Bowman, top 10 at plus 190, a quality bet based on my numbers for Sunday's race. The other top 10 bet is also on a non-playoff driver. That's Eric Almirola at plus 750. And my model is not high in Almirola, so I didn't expect to go into this week betting him in any market because I wouldn't really want to in general. But the market's a little bit lower than I am. I have Almirola's top 10 odds at 17.9%. His implied odds are 11.8%. Stewart-Haas Racing has been awful on tracks like this year, where they've had just no speed on the bigger tracks. Chase Briscoe has been a back marker effectively on this track type, but Almirola at least has been somewhat competitive. He had a 15th place average running position in the first Darlington race, finished 13th in Kansas, 16th in Vegas, and both those tracks have medium tire fall off, whereas Darlington is a big time tire fall off track. They had the Richmond race recently, and Almirola ran really well there. Now, it's a very different track because it runs a different rules package, so you don't want to overweigh that in the model, but it is good to see him have a good run at a track with a lot of tire degradation. So I don't want to be here. I don't want to bet on a driver for SHR to finish top 10 at a track like this because they've been so awful on this track type this year. All the resources, all the focus for that team will be on Kevin Harvick, the lone playoff driver there, but I think 750 is too long. So I'm going to take Eric Almirola top 10 plus 750 in addition to Bowman at plus 750, and then add on the Reddick outright at 13-1. Let's talk now about some Formula One for this week as well. They're out in Monza for the Italian Grand Prix, and the best value on the board earlier on this week has dried up a bit, but there is still value there. When I ran my sims at the first part of the week, the best bet that I saw was Carlos Sainz finished top 6, which was plus 115 at the time. Now, posted my sims over on FanDuel Research, and since that time, we've seen Sainz shorten to minus 110 for a top 6. I do still show value there. Sainz, for me, to finish top 6 is 55.5%. His implied odds at minus 110 are 52.4%. So I believe you can get even money in some places still. So I would at least shop around and see if you can get that on signs. If you can get even money, I would take it. Honestly, at minus 110, I don't think it's a bad bet either, because I do still show a decent amount of value there. I would also say for signs, I've got value in him to finish inside the top 10 at minus 300 and a podium at 5-1. The podium bet specifically, the implied odds at 5-1 are 16.7%. I have signs at 22.3%. That might be a bit high, but I think this is a better track fit for Ferrari than what we've seen here recently because it's a high-speed track. There is extra pressure on them this week because it is their home race, and pressure on Ferrari is probably not a good thing given the way things have gone for them since the start of basically ever since the Michael Schumacher era. So like pressure is probably not a great thing for Ferrari, but I think it's a good track fit for them. So I think it's at least a consideration to go with the signs podium at 5-1. I like the top 10 bet at minus 300. I have signs at 82.1% for a top 10. Implied odds there are 75%. I also do show value on his teammate Charles Leclerc to finish top 10, and that is minus 370. Now, for FanDuel specifically, you cannot parlay top 10 bets. So that's not an option, but Leclerc minus 370, signs minus 300, both values for me based on what my numbers say. I've got Leclerc 83% with his implied odds at 79%. So I think the Ferraris in general kind of undervalued for this week. Now, not to beat Red Bull, I'm not crazy, but to get a podium maybe for signs, get a top 10 for both those guys, and to get a top 6 for signs as well, I think we can see good value there. So if you're betting Formula One for this week, I feel like the best route, as frightening as it may be, bad vibes abound, I think it does make sense to be high on Ferrari for their home Grand Prix in Monza. That's all that we have here for today on covering the spread, but we'll be back once again tomorrow by talking to Pitching Ninja, talking about his favorite strikeout props for Friday, and also full NFL slate coming up next week. Our new schedule will debut there. Looking forward to that. So make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on the FanDuel YouTube page and over on FanDuel TV Plus as well. Thank you once again to Austan Cass for swinging by talking EPL with us. You can find him on Twitter at Austan Cass. Find his work over on FanDuel Research. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can also follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across college football for tonight. Reminder to check out our podcast with Ed from yesterday, and we'll talk to you once again on Friday. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.